Hi, welcome back everyone. Today we are having kind of a guest lecture in our software analysis and design course, which is why the slides look a little different. We are talking about the long-term impacts of software systems, which is super relevant for software analysis and design because that's something that we want to think about during the analysis and design phase. And we are going to do that with the means of some current research, namely SUSAF, the Sustainability Awareness Framework. This is out of the research that I've developed over the past 6 years, and I'm excited to share that with you. So let's go take a look. Make sure you're comfy, make sure you have something nice to drink. I got my tea here. And let's roll. So where did all of this come from and what is it about? When you think about a software system, for example, Airbnb, that rented out short-term things, apartments or just rooms or entire houses, marketplace to rent out your house. The envisioned benefits were that it would bring more availability of cheaper short-term rental options and local accommodation for travelers. So the idea is, if I go travel to a different city, I can get a room from somebody who's traveling at the same time or just has a spare room. And while I'm gone, I may also decide to rent out my room or my house or my apartment to somebody who's traveling to my city. Perfect idea, the sharing economy par excellence. However, there were a couple of things that we didn't quite see coming. And New York and Barcelona and a lot of other cities have gotten to feel that a lot. What do we see? In New York, for example, homeowners can earn 55% more than the median long-term rental using Airbnb. Therefore, estimated Airbnb removed 7,000 to 13,000 units of housing in New York, which led to an increase of about 1.4% in the median long-term rent. Now you may say 1.4%, that's not a whole lot, but it does add up for sure. And this is the median. That means for some people it may have increased a lot more. And 72% of the population in neighborhoods at highest risk of Airbnb-induced gentrification are non-white. So we also see an increasing race separation. And all of this was explored by Wachsmuth and Weisler in the report referenced at the bottom of the slide. Now, the question is, during design time, not all impacts were understood. How could that possibly be preempted? And with that, we get to the background of the Sustainability Awareness Framework. What do we mean by sustainability? Let's start with that. So the Oxford English Dictionary defines sustainability as the quality of being sustained. Sustained can be defined as capable of being endured and capable of being maintained. And the other definition we have is the differentiation between sustainable use and sustainable development. So sustainable use of a system S with regard to function F and a time horizon T means that we use the system S in a way that does not compromise its ability to fulfill a function F for a period of time T. It doesn't deplete the resource. So for sustainable use, Lawrence Hilty, the professor who wrote this, likes to use a sharp knife as an example. We can use this sharp knife to carry out its function, to cut very, very well over a long period of time, completely independent of what that knife is being used for, whether it's to cut up vegetables or to perform surgery on somebody or whatever else. And then sustainable development, in contrast, is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is the definition by the UN in the Brundtland Report from 1987. So that acknowledges the concept of changing stakeholder requirements and indicates potential conflict in between generations, that there could be such a thing as a difference between our generation's needs and the next generation's needs. Now, with that differentiation, we need a couple more concepts, and this sustainable development definition has been at the foundation for the Sustainable Development Goals that you may be familiar with, also developed by the UN. And if not, you definitely take a minute to Google that and look into it in more detail, because I'm not covering it in more detail here. What we do cover are the 5 dimensions of sustainability. So from the Brundtland Report, you may have heard about the 3 pillars before, which is the economic, environmental, and social dimensions. They are also often referred to as triple bottom line. Now, the Sustainability Awareness Framework extends these to 5 dimensions, including the individual and the technical one. And these came into being because in order to have a functioning society, we need sustainable individuals first. And as we are trying to talk about software systems and discuss their long-term impact, we need a technical dimension as well. Now, the definitions of the dimensions are the following. The environmental dimension covers the use of and stewardship of natural resources. It includes questions ranging from immediate waste production and energy consumption to the balance of local ecosystems and concerns of climate change. The economic dimension covers financial aspects and business value. It includes capital growth and liquidity, questions of investment and financial operations. The social dimension covers relationships between individuals and groups. For example, this aspect covers the structures of mutual trust and communication in a social system and the balance between conflicting interests. The individual dimension covers individual freedom and agency, the ability to act in an environment, human dignity, and fulfillment. It includes the ability of individuals to thrive, exercise their rights, and develop freely. The technical dimension covers the ability to maintain and evolve artificial systems such as software, and it refers to maintenance and evolution, resilience, and the ease of system transitions. The other concept that we need is the matrix of ICT effects. These effects can be either positive or negative, and they can have different time scales. This is also proposed by Lorenz Hilty as well as Bernhard Erbischer. Both of them work for the University of Zurich. Then they have differentiated that ICT can be part of the problem and ICT can be part of the solution. ICT is short for information and communication technology. So on the left side, we see that the technology enables the application, which again enables behavioral and structural change. And then on the ICT as part of the problem side, we can see on the technology level that the life cycle of ICT, the production, use, and disposal, that those are classified as the direct effects. We see that under number 1 on the right side. And then part of the solution, by definition, that doesn't quite work with the life cycle effects, because any ICT that you put out there has life cycle effects, and those are by definition a use of resources, so they can't at the same time be better than that. On the second level, on the application level, we have for ICT as part of the problem induction effects as well as obsolescence effects. So induction effects means that we are inducing the use of more technology, and obsolescence means, oh, in addition, now we have all these other devices laying around because we are developing better IT products and doing that faster. So there we go. Many of us have old hardware devices laying around at home that are no longer of use. On the part of solution side, we can see that we can have substitution effects with technology. So I can substitute a virtual solution for an analog solution. And we can have optimization effects. A lot of processes have become so much more effective and so much faster and easier. Those are called enabling effects. And then on the third level, the behavioral and structural change level, we see in the part of the problem rebound effects. That is, for example, the fact that we end up using more energy rather than less, despite technology becoming more efficient, because we kind of have that excuse in our head of, oh, now that's more efficient, I can use it more. And there are certain emerging risks associated with it. For example, we don't really know what's going to happen when we run out of rare earths. And then as part of the solution, we see a transition towards sustainable patterns of production and consumption. So there can be positive systemic effects as we shift to more sustainable technology. Now, with both of these concepts in mind, first the full definition for the 3 levels of effects. The immediate effects are the direct effects of the production, use, and disposal of the software systems. So that includes the immediate benefit of software features and the full lifecycle impacts, as would be included in a lifecycle assessment approach, which evaluates the environmental impact of a product's life from the extraction of raw materials to its disposal or recycling. And then the enabling effects arise from the application of a system over time. And that includes opportunities to consume more or less resources, but also other changes induced by the usage of a system. And then the structural effects represent persistent changes that are observable at the macro level, so on a community or a societal level. And structures emerge from the entirety of actions at the micro level and in turn influence these actions. Ongoing use of a new software system can lead to shifts in accumulation of capital, drive changes in social norms, policies, and laws, and alter our relationship with the natural world. Now with that, we're going to take both of those concepts together, the 5 dimensions of sustainability and the 3 orders of effect, and we're going to turn this into a framework that we call the SUSAF framework. And this framework has a process that is going to guide us through how we can investigate the sustainability of a particular software system bit by bit. Then it has a set of questions under which we can analyze a specific software system for each dimension, for each of those 5 dimensions, and according to the orders of effect. And then we have the templates along with it, and they help us to write down the results that we get to. And then finally, there's a report form and a type of diagram that helps summarize all the impacts that were found. So in the following, we look through a workshop guidance that we have done with industry partners in different countries. Let me count. We had a study in California, we had a study in Finland, we had one in India, we had one in Sweden, and we have also tried this out at 5 different universities by now. Also California, Sweden, Finland, Germany, and Spain. And there are more in the making. So this framework has been around for a bit, and I'm happy to introduce that to you today. So for the process, we start with a warm-up where the moderator welcomes and explains logistics, and then the company would introduce their product or system, and then the moderator introduces the SUSAF framework, which is what I just did. And at the end of that phase, we would have a clear picture of the system vision that the company that has the workshop running with them has in mind and the known effects of this. Then we go through a capture phase, which is what we're going to do next, where the moderator, in this case, me, hi, leads through the dimensions along with the questions. And then the stakeholders, which right now you are representing, reflect and discuss and brainstorm about those questions. And ideally, we would have a scribe that takes the notes and writes down some cross-references that come up during the discussion. And all of that gets captured in discussion notes. I'm sorry, I don't have little scribes to hand out to sit next to you, so you will have to take your own notes as we go through this process. And then we have an analysis phase after, where the moderator presents and asks open questions. And then the group classifies the effects into 3 orders. And this is something we're gonna kind of simulate today, but on the quick side. And then the group identifies chains of effects, and the stakeholders discuss relations across dimensions. And then we identify potential actions to mitigate and change those effects as needed. And the output of that is classified effects and chains of effects. And then finally, there would be a synthesis, where the moderator facilitates the synthesis of chains of effect into diagrams. And then the detailed diagrams can be added for in-depth visuals. And finally, the threats and opportunities get summarized in the report. And so the output we have from that phase is diagrams and a report. You excited? Let's jump into the process. So we're going to try this out. And for that, we're going to need the key topics, which are the following. So we have 5 per dimension, and they're ordered in the way that has been found out in our studies to be beneficial for leading the discussion. So in the social area, we have a sense of community, we have trust, we have inclusiveness, equity, and participation as topics. That means that in order to explore what social sustainability means for the system under discussion, or how that system under discussion is going to impact social sustainability, we're going to ask questions about these 5 topics, about sense of community, trust, inclusiveness, equity, and participation. And we know that there could potentially be more key topics found under each of those keywords, or for each of those dimensions, but the workshop is already pretty long. So if we added more and more key topics, then yes, the discussion may be more encompassing. It would also be even longer, and that would be really rough, because it's already an entire whole day workshop. So for the individual dimension, we talk about health, lifelong learning, privacy, safety, and agency. And then for the environmental dimension, we talk material and resources, waste and pollution, energy, biodiversity, and logistics. For the economic dimension, we talk value, CRM, supply chain, governance, and innovation. And on the technical level, we talk about maintainability, usability, adaptability, security, and scalability. Now, this is what the templates roughly look like. So we have on the left, very illegible, don't worry, you don't have to read it right now, the questions template. But instead of this printout earlier version of the template, we're gonna just have the questions on the slides here. And on the right-hand side, you see the empty template for the diagram that has the 5 dimensions, as well as the 3 orders of effect. Some of my students have coined the term spiderweb diagram for this. It's also known as a type of radar chart, and we call it the SUSAF diagram. So this diagram is a visual representation of chains of effects. It has the 5 dimensions and orders of effects. And here you see one simplified example for that Airbnb system that we used in the motivation for this lecture. So from renting rooms as an immediate effect, you can get to greater earnings as an individual, and then that leads to an increase in rents on the economic side, as well as to gentrification, which again, on the social dimension, leads to greater racial disparities. That is one chain of effects that was identified for this for the Airbnb system. And so let's dive right in. Warm up. In the introductory presentations, which we're simulating a bit here, me as the moderator, I'd get started with, I really want all of the workshop participants to understand what's going on and how they can benefit from this workshop, which is why the past 15 minutes or so, I've explained the SUSAF. And then the company gets a time slot of, say, 5 minutes or 10 minutes to explain the product or system that they are putting out there that they want analyzed. So it's important for everyone to understand the scope and the rationale for the current status of the system under consideration. And what that means is, as a moderator, I'm in the role of a consultant, and I come to a company that wants their product or system or service evaluated. So they have to tell me a little bit about that service before we can start talking about it. And then we get to the questions. So in order for you to be able to do that now, I want you to pick an example system that you want to work with. Grab a piece of paper and a pen or a digital notepad, whatever is your favorite. And then you can pick one of the systems that we've worked on as examples for the semester. So that could be the amusement park example, that could be the robot that we've been working with, that could be the bartering system, whichever system you like most. And whichever system you think might be most interesting to look at for the sustainability impacts. And when you've made your choice, we can move on into the capture phase. So this is a moderated group workshop with usually 3 roles: stakeholders, moderator, scribe. Sorry, no scribe on board today. You're doing it yourself. The moderator leads the stakeholders through the dimensions using questions and facilitates discussion. And the stakeholders brainstorm on issues, which is what you're doing today, reflect on each other's perceptions. So if there's 2 of you sitting in front of the computer, you can talk about it with each other and then note down your insights. And the scribe, also you, takes notes and denotes cross-references. So if 2 scribes are available, then one can do it more detailed and the other one more high level for the analysis structure, whatever floats your boat. And then the stakeholders confirm the notes captured and accurately represent the discussion points. 2 in 1 for you today. Let's dive right into the questions. For the social dimension, we are starting with a sense of community. So a sense of community means that people belong to an organization, to an area, or to a group of like-minded people. Would you say that the system under consideration can affect a person's sense of belonging to these groups? For example, we're looking for insights here into effects on user groups or members of a team and whether they feel a sense of belonging. So in the past, a couple of things that have come up for us here are that depending on the user interface of a system, people may feel like they're part of a specific group, or that they kind of not feel quite qualified to do this. That would then be a negative effect. So positive is if they feel like, oh, this is entirely my jam, these are my people, when they log onto a system and when they use a system. Or there could be kind of a strangeness and a weird feeling about it, then it would be a negative effect. Could be either one of those. What's it for the system that you chose? Next one then, trust. Trust means having a firm belief in the reliability, truth, or ability of someone or something. Can the system change the trust between the users and the business that owns the system? Or what about the trust between the users themselves? So for each of these question slides, and we got 25 of them, you want to take a minute, hit pause, and then think about what trust means for the system that you're analyzing. So here, for example, we're looking for insights into whether users trust a system with their data, whether they trust in a company, whether team members trust in the commitments of their colleagues, or if they trust the technology itself. Bitcoin, anyone? Do you trust Bitcoin? Can we trust Bitcoin? For what do we trust in it, and when are we not sure? And when do we trust a company that uses a specific technology? And when do we trust the technology, but not the company? Very interesting to explore. Hit pause. And then we'll move on into inclusiveness and diversity. So that means the practice or policy of including people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized. Can the system impact how people perceive others? Does the system include users with different backgrounds, age groups, education levels, or other differences? Does the system cater for these differences? If so, how? For example, here we are looking for insights into whether certain aspects of the system cater to only one stakeholder group while involuntarily excluding others, for example, a favored customer segment or a specific type of employee or domain expert. Or the system could include all groups of a community that before were separated or divided. Could go either way. Hit pause and think about it. Take notes. Then equity. So equity means the quality of being fair and impartial. Would you say the system can make people be treated differently from each other? For example, because the system carries out data analytics or influences human decisions. So we look for insights into whether the system supports fairness and gives equal opportunity to everyone. And some biases to equity are often hard to detect during development. For example, facial recognition algorithms. A while later, there were studies about facial recognition algorithms being really bad at recognizing gender in non-white people. Where'd that come from? Well, the people who developed the first facial recognition algorithms happened to be all white. So they just took their own photos as test data, and that worked pretty well. On other races, not so much. So some biases came into these systems because of a development circumstance that wasn't questioned at the time. We're not saying they did that on purpose. It just happened that way and they didn't think about it enough. And there's plenty of articles out there if you want to read up on that in more detail. Next one, participation and communication. Participation and communication means the act of taking part in something by imparting or the interchange of thoughts, opinions, or information by speech, writing, or signs. There's a lot we can ask here. Can the system change the way people participate in an organization or other social groups? Does it affect the way people communicate verbally and non-verbally? Does it affect the way people create networks? Does it affect the way people form bonds? Does it affect the way does it affect the effort people put in group work? Does it affect the actions people take to achieve the goals, projects, and tasks of a group? Does it affect the way people engage with others? Or the way people support, consider, critique, or argue with others? So here we're essentially looking for insights into how certain wording in the system may lead to improved or worsened communication in between people. If you use the bartering systems, maybe a big impact, or even for the amusement park. So hit pause and think about it. With that, we are through our first dimension. And if you're not sure about the note-taking part, make sure you check out the workbook that we're providing as a download along with these slides. I'm putting the link into the notes for this. Maybe using the template is going to be easier for you. So for the individual dimension, We start with the topic of health. Means the state of a person's mental or physical condition. Can the system improve or worsen a person's physical health? What about a person's mental and emotional health? Can the system make a person feel undervalued or disrespected? What about dependent on the system or anyone? What about coerced to do something that they don't feel comfortable with? Can the system make a person feel any other feeling that they might perceive as positive or as negative? So here we're looking for insights into how the system may lead to improved or worsened health for people. For example, lead to longer working hours or simplified working or improved living conditions. Any of those. Hit pause, think about it. And then lifelong learning. So that means the provision or use of both formal and informal learning opportunities throughout people's lives in order to foster the continuous development and improvement of the knowledge and skills needed for employment and personal fulfillment. Would you say the system under analysis can improve or worsen the knowledge of a person? Can it change their education level? So we're looking for insights into whether the system provides for improving knowledge, skills, and capabilities of a person, or whether it leads to degradation of any of these. For example, can you remember more than 3 mobile phone numbers off the top of your head? Did therefore your mobile phone improve your skills? Not in memorizing phone numbers, but maybe in some other regards. Hit pause, think about it. Next one, privacy. Privacy means the state of being free from unwanted or undue intrusion or disturbance in one's private life or affairs. Can the system expose or help to hide a person's identity? What about their whereabouts or preferences? What about their relation to friends and family? Can the system make a person feel more or less exposed in any way? So here we're looking for insights into whether the system is part of kind of a Big Brother conspiracy thing, where everything is exposed. Have you read 1984? Classic science fiction. If not, that may be a good investment of a few hours over the weekend or an evening. Or whether people feel like their data is well protected or not even asked for. That could be good. Hit pause, think about it. Safety. Safety means the condition of being protected from or unlikely to cause danger, risk, or injury. Can the system expose or protect a person from physical harm? If the system is safe, can it make a person feel more or less exposed to physical harm? What about if you use that system in an unintended way? So we're looking for insights into any safety concerns that could have an effect on people handling the system or effect on people that use a certain service by the system. Hit pause. Agency. Agency means the capacity of an individual to act independently and to make decisions of their own free will. Would you say the system can empower a person to take an action when necessary? If it does not empower, can it prevent them from taking an action? For example, because the user interface does not allow them to. Can people affected by the system truly understand its implications? Can a person realistically voice their concerns about the system? For example, does the person feel comfortable enough to say no? If a person cannot voice their concerns, who can represent them? So we're looking for insights into whether the system may make any person feel like they cannot exercise their free will, whether they feel restricted by the system in a way they can make their choices or understand the impact of their choices. Here you may also think about the not so frequent user groups, maybe elderly people. If they don't feel comfortable with a system, maybe they feel like it's restricting their agency in some way. Hit pause, think about it. There was another university where we tried this out. I just remembered we also did this in Kampala in Uganda, in the middle of Africa, or a little further to the east. And that was one of the aspects that they found fairly interesting. With that, we get to the environmental dimension. So we'll start with material and resources. That includes everything that is needed to manufacture, produce, deploy, run, and remove a system. Which materials may be consumed to produce the system? What about materials to use the system? For example, supplies or additionally required hardware. Does the system change the way people consume material? For example, encourage people to buy more. So we're looking for insights into how resource-intensive the life cycle phases of the system under analysis are, as well as additional implications. Scoping and system boundaries are the really important question here. For example, is a certain hardware, a phone, required to use a service? And how far do I consider that in my resource calculation? If you've ever done a life cycle analysis, you know that the scoping, like where do I draw the boundary of my analysis, is one of the most difficult things and needs to be very clearly stated. That is one of the reasons why I am such a pain about defining the exact boundaries of your system when you model the software systems. Now you know. Next one, waste and pollution. That means looking into the effects the system might have on soil, atmospheric, and water pollution. Does producing parts of the system or other supplies for it generate waste or emissions? Does the use of the system itself produce waste or emissions? Does it influence how much waste or emissions people or institutions generate? Or alternatively, does it promote or impair recycling? So we're looking for insights into any pollution that could derive from development or usage of the system, or waste generated or avoided by the use of the system. For example, a carpooling system decreasing emissions of its user community compared to all individual rides. When we look at energy, that means all energy that is used by or for the system, as well as any external energy system the system under analysis may affect. So, does the system affect the need for production of energy? If so, how? What about the use of energy? For example, enables or encourages less energy consumption or consumption from renewable resources? Does the energy to run the system hardware come from renewable energy sources? If not, is there a way to incentivize renewable energy? So we're looking for insights into whether the system may require the installation of additional energy generation resources, or whether it in turn may considerably lower a user's energy consumption in a certain area of their life. Hit pause, question your system. And then we get to biodiversity. That includes the effects of a system on biodiversity in its operational environment, as well as any other affected land use. So would you say that the system that you're currently analyzing can impact the plants or animals around it? Or maybe elsewhere? Can the system change the size, use of composition, or composition of the soil around it? For example, by occupying land or by converting land into cropland, either right around the system or elsewhere. So we're looking for insights into potential negative impacts of the development or use of a system on the flora and fauna of the surrounding environment, which means it can influence the system, but is not part of the system. So it could also be a positive one, but that's only for very specific systems that are probably designed to enhance exactly that. Hit pause, think about it. Then logistics means the effects of the system on whether, and if so, how much and how far people and or goods have to move or be moved. So does the system affect the need for moving people or goods? If so, how? Does the system affect the means by which people or goods move? If so, how? And does the system affect the distance that people or goods move? If so, how? So in general, just insights into increases and decreases for needs to move people or goods based on the system services that you provide. Hit pause. And with that, we get to the economic dimension. 3 dimensions down, 2 to go. First, value. That means the importance, worth, or usefulness of something. Principles or standards of behavior. One's judgment of what is important in life. How does the system create or destroy monetary value? And for whom are those monetary values generated or destroyed? Are there any other related types of business value? For whom are these generated or destroyed? So we're looking for insights into who are the financial beneficiaries of the system and in what way they benefit, or maybe how someone could lose money by means of the system or be financially affected negatively. After that, customer relationship management. So that's an approach to manage a company's interaction with its current and potential customers to improve business relationships with its customer base, specifically focusing on customer retention and ultimately driving sales growth. Does the system affect the relationship between the business and its customers? If so, how? Does the system enable co-creation or co-destruction of value? If so, how? Do these changes in relationships between business and its customers impact the financial situation of the business and their partners? If so, how? And can it also impact the financial situation of their customers and others? And if so, how? So we look for insights into how the system may positively or negatively affect customer relationship management and thereby help or hinder the business, for example, an interactive network. Hit pause, think about what does customer relationship management mean for the system that you're developing, and how could that affect the economic bottom line positively or negatively? Supply chain means a system of organizations, people, activities, information, and resources involved in moving a product or service from supplier to customer. How does the system alter the supply chain of the business who owns it? How does the system enable co-creation or co-destruction of value? And how can these changes in supply chain impact the financial situation of the business and their partners? Can it also impact the financial situation of their customers and others? So we look for insights into how the development or usage of the system may affect the supply chain and add or destruct value. For example, collaborations with local suppliers may strengthen a regional business community. Hit pause, and then we move to governance. That means the processes of interaction and decision-making among the actors involved in the system through the laws, norms, power, or language of an organized society. How does the system affect how and by whom decisions are made? How does the system affect the activities or resources of the business? How does it affect the kind of relationship between the business and institutions that may be affected by it? What about the means by which the relationships take place? So the channels, how do those people communicate with each other? How can changes in governance and process impact the financial situation of the business and their partners? Can it also impact the financial situation of their customers and others? So we're looking for insights into how the system supports or hinders or otherwise influences decision-making processes and other activities. For example, feedback, voting on features, or company policies. Hit pause, think about company policies for a bit for your system. Innovation, that refers to something new or to a change made to an existing product, idea, or field. Does the system affect the investment on research and development? If so, how? What about research and development for parts of the system? How can changes in innovation and research and development impact the financial situation of the business and their partners? And can it also impact the financial situation of their customers and others? So here we're looking for insights into whether and how much the stakeholders are invested in research and development, and what the consequences of that are. For example, the effects on competitors. And with that, fifth dimension, almost there. So here we want to make a differentiation whether we're working on a conceptual early level or whether it's the evolution of a system. And there are just a couple of differences that apply to one or both of the following. So questions that are marked with A are at the level of a conceptual idea, so before the first design of a system, and questions marked with B are for system evolution, when the system already exists or is designed. Just keep that in mind. First topic, maintenance. Maintenance means the degree to which an application is understood, repaired, or enhanced. And most of the questions apply for both types of systems, conceptual stage or evolution. Check how long the system is expected to be used for. And then in 10 years of time, how difficult would it be for a developer to fix bugs in the system? Are the operating system and runtime environment expected to change? If yes, to which degree? And what will be required of the maintainers? Can the correctness be affected? Can the system affect the correctness of other systems? So if we carry out a calculation for a different system, then we could affect that system's correctness. If the robot writes a letter but exchanges some words, could affect the correctness of an action that the person receiving the letter was supposed to carry out. So we'll look for examples, for insights into the planning horizon for the system, as well as thoughts on how easy or difficult maintenance is expected to be. And with that, usability means the degree to which software can be used by specified consumers to achieve quantified objectives with effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction in a quantified context of use. Who's expected to use that system, and how experienced do they have to be to interact with a system like this? What can ease or make more difficult the use of the system? And can first-time users intuitively use it? How are first-time non-technical users likely to respond when asked if they would like to use the system again? And can experienced users get their job done efficiently? Are they likely to bypass the system for any reason? So we're looking for insights into how clear the user groups are differentiated for that system and how well understood they are in the domain of the system usage. Hit pause. Consider. Adaptability and extensibility. So it means the ability of a system to adapt itself to fit its behavior according to changes in its environment or in parts of the system itself. How easy would it be to add substantial new features? How likely is it that someone will want to use the system in a different context? Ever heard of unintended uses? What can make that easier or more difficult? Is the system required to adapt itself to fit new usage scenarios? And what can make that easier or more difficult? So we're looking for insights into how easy or hard it is to modify the system for future expected or unexpected uses and apply it to new usage scenarios. For example, who of you planned 10 years ago to have all their music and photos on their phone? I didn't. Next one, security. Security means freedom from or resilience against potential harm or other unwanted coercive change caused by external or internal attacks. So which assets controlled by the system would be desirable to an attacker? What are risks associated with these assets? Financial information, people's whereabouts, preferences, purchase history, personal data. What comes to mind? What are the likely vulnerabilities of the system? We're looking for insights into vulnerabilities of the system and how attackers could possibly exploit those from internal or external access points, including social engineering. So also think about that one. If you're not sure what social engineering is, Google that. Wait, I'm not advertising for a particular search engine. Use your favorite search engine and look for it. Now you get it. It's more about how socially responsible are people with their passwords, for example. Okay, hit pause. Scalability. That means the system's ability to handle growing amounts of work in a graceful manner, or to be enlarged horizontally or vertically, and will continue to function with comparable response times. So how likely would you say the system that you're analyzing is required to support changes in workload? And what could make that easier or more difficult? So under what circumstances would you have to scale up? So we're looking for insights into how well the system would deal with a significantly increased user base or strongly increased service demands and the effects of that on the operational environment. Wow, made it through 5 dimensions with 5 topics each. Well done. Feel free to hit pause once more and go to the restroom, or run around the block, or do some jumping jacks, or just take a few deep breaths. With that, we get to the extreme scenario. So far, we've just asked about the effects, and now the question is, can we just try to scale everything up a bit? So looking back at your notes so far, imagine that a lot of people worldwide are using this or a similar system for many years or decades. Think about how one thing may lead to another, and we call this a chain of effects. For example, if people feel closer to their neighbors, they may choose to buy from local shops or choose proximity products, which can then foment local businesses and finally better distribute wealth. What potential chains of effects exist in the system that you're currently looking at? And you can think quite a bit in the future, and you can just extrapolate what if the system becomes widely successful. What if the little app that you programmed last week all of a sudden gets a 5 million user base? What would happen? Apart from you earning money. Also consider the other ones. What if everybody had those little robots? What if the amusement park becomes the most successful ever? What if the community bartering system becomes the new market platform and everything else is not so important anymore? So with an enormous user base, you become really successful, and you try to understand what are the impacts that that would have in the different dimensions if that were to occur. Because that's what happened with Airbnb. It became wildly successful, and all of a sudden there are all these other not so great side effects. So that's where we get to crunch time for this. And with all that, we're done with the capture and brainstorming part, and we move on to the analysis part. So we start with some open questions. If I, as the moderator, was following along as you were discussing through all these items, I could keep a list of open questions that I have. And then you, as stakeholders, could clarify them. That we can't really do right now. The next step is then the effect classification, where a group classifies all effects that were identified according to their dimension as well as their order, first, second, or third order effect. This is important because while you talk about security, you may actually think about some scalability issue, and then you may think about some agency issue and some trust issue. And so those lead you to different dimensions, and it is not so important during the discussion of which effect they came up, but where do they belong, as well as the orders of effect. And then you get to the chains of effects, where you try to understand which of these first order effects lead to which of the second order effects lead to which of the third order effects. So To do that, you pick one concern or issue that was identified from the joint discussion at a time, and then ask what effect that issue could have on the other dimensions. For example, will people be affected? Will the environment be affected? How so? And then discuss cross relations across the dimensions and orders of effect. So if you have effects that leap into a different dimension, what does that mean? And then we discuss potential actions required to mitigate risks and or change impacts of that list that we come up with. So, open questions, what we have learned during a few of the workshops. It's not so important to go through all of the notes again. Maybe some of the brainstorming just went too extensive, but focus on summarizing the the outcomes, and check for open questions in there. And then try to label the effects in your notes, the ones that you found. So for example, as an analyzer, I would label the effects either physically or the digital comment with a this order effect and positive or negative. So first order effects tend to show up mainly in the environmental and technical dimensions. Negative for resource or energy consumption, and second order effects are across all dimensions. They can be positive as in substitution or optimization, or they can be negative as in induction or obsolescence. And third order effects often show up for the extreme scenarios, so the part that we had last in the capture process. They can be positive as in sustainable patterns of production or consumption, or they can be negative as rebound effects or emerging risks. And at the bottom of the slide, you see a little example from our case study in Finland. System does not encourage people to consume more in the future. It will encourage people to consume less gasoline and prompt savings. So encourage people to consume less gasoline and prompt savings are marked as second order positive, less gasoline used. And that way you go through all your notes. So if you have taken digital notes, go ahead and label those. Otherwise, just use a different color pen and go label the effects that you've written down for the 25 questions on your piece of paper. Yep, hit pause, do that now. Once you have labeled all those effects, you compile all first order effects A into a list L. Then for each second order effect B, you check which of the identified first order effects could lead to it, and add that effect to the sublist of induced effects for A. And for each third order effect C, then check which of the identified second order effects B could lead to it, and then add that to the sublist of induced effects for that second order effect. So you're going to get quite a few lists here. It could get extensive. Or maybe you just end up with a list of 20. That's okay too. And then you try to thematically cluster which areas came up during the discussion and list the chains of effects that belong to this area and create a short description that summarizes. So now we're trying to boil down from up to 25 pages of notes to some thematic key concerns that popped up either time and again or that are close to each other, so that we can put this into a final report template and present an overview to management, for example. Because in the long run, what this is trying to do is help make better choices, better design choices about the systems that we put out there. And with that, we get to the synthesis, where we put all this together in two places, in the report and in the diagram. So for the report, the analysis outcomes get summarized with the help of a report template that includes threats and opportunities in these thematic areas. And then for the diagram, the moderator facilitates the synthesis of the chains of effects into an overview diagram. And you can definitely have several diagrams to support in-depth explanation of key issues. The structure of the report is a 4-page template plus appendices. It starts with a system vision that was done during the first part of the workshop, then initial perception of sustainability effects. So what did people think about the sustainability of their system before we did the analysis? And then a highlight of the thematic groups and their key effects that were identified in the workshop, and then the threats and opportunities at the end. And we have the diagram that visualizes the most important chains of effects in one overview. And then you can have additional diagrams per key thematic area. And this is just the same example that we had earlier from the Airbnb system. You got it. This is the finish line. It has a second end in there because this is the workshop template we developed for the Finnish workshop, and then we had modified versions for the other countries. So I hope this gives you a good first insight. Make sure you get that workshop report template downloaded as well. Link is in the notes. And really try that out with your own system. If you kind of skim through the lecture and you're like, oh, I'm just going to sail along listening to you talk, that's fine. You're not going to learn as much from it as if you try it out yourself. If we were in a physical classroom, I'd be standing next to you, looking over your shoulder, filling out that workbook. So you better download that to get your full benefits from this little online education module. And if this really helped you, or if you hated it, we take all the feedback we can get. And if you would like to try that out in a company, we're open for that as well. Here are some more resources and references and some further contacts if you're interested to try this out. Also, there's our website for the Karlskrona Manifesto, as well as just sustainabilitydesign.org, which is the group that has elaborated this sustainability awareness framework. If you have any questions, email us. And finally, here are a couple of the academic references that were earlier in the slides. So feel free to read up on any of those. Shoot me an email if you need any of those and can't get access to it behind a paywall. I'll be happy to respond to your request. And with that, we're wrapping up today's module. Thank you so much for watching. Leave your questions and comments below. I hope to see you soon.